Welcome to the Inside Silverstone podcast, a business-focused podcast covering all things tech, engineering and innovation. Hosted by me, Chris Broome, a huge tech, motorsport and gaming fan, and also the owner of Longhurst, a firm of lifestyle financial planners and independent financial advisors located in Silverstone, Northamptonshire. This is a series of unscripted and unpolished conversations with leading business owners, thought leaders and high-tech talent where we discuss their experiences within the Silverstone business and motorsport region. We will also be asking them to share their knowledge, insight and their thoughts on the future just for you. If you're looking to learn more about the Silverstone high growth region and commercially connect with like-minded peers, you've definitely come to the right place. Welcome to Inside Silverstone. Welcome to the next edition of Inside Silverstone. My name is Chris Broome and I am your host. Today we are recording Mastermind Sessions number 6, titled Women in Motorsport. We are kindly being hosted by the BRDC, so thank you very much for putting us up. And I have 4 fantastic ladies here who are from different backgrounds within motorsport, and we're going to have a good natter and a good gas bag about what you do, why you do it, and hopefully sort of career paths for others looking to enter. So, with the machine playing this time, we are going to open up with introductions. So if we start at the end, who are you and what do you do?
My name is Lou Johnson. I'm a motorsport photographer working primarily in Formula E.
Louise Goodman. I am a motorsport journalist, so I've been working for many years. Started off as a press officer, then probably best known for my work with ITV on their Formula 1 coverage, and now part of ITV's presentation team on the British Touring Car Championship. But alongside that, I also run my own media training company, Goodman Media.
No pressure then, Chris. Right. Yourself.
Hi, I'm Clare Morden. I'm a motorsport doctor. My day job is technically working as an intensive care doctor for the NHS, but then I got into motorsport about 10 years ago. Don't want to reveal too much because then you can work out my age. And I got into it because I've always had a passion about motor racing. And then I started off just attending days as a doctor and worked up to Chief Medical Officer for Brands Hatch and also extrication doctor for Formula E.
Okay. And yourself. So we had you on the previous episode, number 5, but quick reintroduction for those that haven't seen that episode.
My name is Cristiana Pace. I'm a motorsport and sustainability consultant, so they call me now. I've been in motorsport for 20 years, working in engineering mainly. I was with the FIA F1 technical department, and then I was with Williams Advanced Engineering when leading the Generation 1 battery for Formula E. And I'm also a member of the Silverstone Technology cluster. Well, member and ambassador.
You're an ambassador?
Yeah, exactly,
absolutely.
for Silverstone Technology cluster.
Yeah, really important cluster. So first question I always ask on the podcast is the sort of genesis behind why you do what you do. So I think where we need to spin that is, within the health profession, obviously TV, presenting, journalism and photography. Why motorsport? Where's the niche there? Where's the love of that come from? Is that a childhood thing? Is that something that you were forced to do? Where's it come from?
I'm quite happy to take that at first. I know, no pressure. Okay. I've always watched motorsport. So my parents were marshals in the 60s and 70s.
Wow, okay.
And then had us, and then obviously we took over their lives. And so we would regularly watch the Formula 1 on TV on a Sunday, but I always wanted to be a doctor as well. And there was a chap who most people in motorsport would know, Professor Sid Watkins. He was a neurosurgeon. And he developed a lot of the safety aspects and the medical facilities within the motorsport world to the level they're at now. So essentially, drivers can get really good trackside treatment and transferred to the appropriate facility rapidly, which didn't happen, say, 40 years ago. Okay. And there was a much higher incident and mortality rate and things like that. And so he was quite an inspiration. And I thought I'd go to university and become Chief Medical Officer for Formula 1. Not quite there yet. It's quite a long process, and obviously I have to do my NHS training as well. So I work in intensive care, and the motorsport gives me my passion of watching racing, but also you get to deal with trauma and the day-to-day stuff I see in the NHS, but on a more maybe intense basis.
Yeah.
Although some days I don't do anything, which is a good day.
Sure.
So it varies. That's why.
I wanted to be a doctor when I was growing up.
Did you?
And then I started doing physics and chemistry and decided I didn't want to be a doctor anymore. That was far too much like hard work.
But the strange thing is, we don't use physics and chemistry really on a day-to-day
You
basis.
tried telling my teachers at school that they insisted I needed to have it. So mine, I honestly, I don't know where my love of it came from. I just came out loving things with wheels and engines. So some of my earliest memories as a kid are being, was my biggest thrills. Well, as a real youngster, sitting on my dad's knee. I don't know whether any of you did this, but sitting on my dad's knee as I would steer us around various picnic areas in the New Forest. And then the minute my feet could touch the pedals, when my dad got home, A, it was lovely to see my dad, but B, I was most excited about being allowed to park the car in the garage. So
Nice.
I was allowed to drive it forwards, and that was a big thrill. So I just, as I say, I don't know where it came from. There was no history of motorsport in my family. I did actually, as a child, I grew up in a town in Hampshire, Alresford, which is where Derek Warwick comes from. So as a kid, I used to walk past Warwick trailers on my way to school and used to lust after. There was a really gorgeous Full Capri.
Nice.
The orange, with the lovely slatted, bright orange with the lovely sort of slats on the rear windscreen. So lusted after that car. And I knew about Derek. We used to read him up in the local papers, but there was never any desire to work in motorsport. For me, it just came about as a sort of set of happy circumstance and just kind of fitted with, what I'd grown up loving. But I didn't attend a race, unlike you. My first ever time going to a race was probably going to the British Grand Prix at Brands Hatch in 19 something. I'm definitely not going to say because I'll definitely date myself. But I drove down with mates, so I was either in my late teens or early 20s. That's for sure. So, but all my mates, as when I was in my teens, a lot of my misspent youth was misspent on the back of a motorbike or doing handbrake turns on a cricket pitch somewhere or that kind of yeah. So it was just always there within me, and for me I feel like it's got to be in there if you're going to work in the sector, because I've always said it's not a job, it's a way of life. No matter which aspect of the sport you're in, I think you've got to, you just wouldn't put in the hours unless you liked what you're dealing with.
All the travelling, etc.
You'd agree?
Yeah, you can't do it. You can't do it unless you actually love what you do. And for me, it was actually my parents. So my dad used to work just in an Audi car dealership sort of thing, running that. And I would go on a Saturday and I would park all the cars in the garage on my dad's. Yeah, exactly that. And my dad would often go up to Brands Hatch and we'd go into kind of hospitality or something. And I'd get plonked under the table as like a 4-year-old with colouring books. You've all been there. And I would slowly make my way towards the lovely windows, just like this, and sit and watch the racing. And my dad would be like, right, come on, main race is gone. And I'd be like, but there's some support races. We need to stay and watch the support races. And my mum would be like, oh, okay, this is the thing that's happening now, then okay. And I'd sit and watch the races with my dad. And when I got to about 15, I started to get into photography. And then my biggest memories of motorsport have always been visual. So that amazing shot used to get in the 90s, but they don't do it so much anymore in Formula One. Please do it now. When the cars come up over just the brow of the hill and they pull the focus straight through that wonderful heat haze. And that is one of my first memories as a kid. And it's that, and then it's Monaco and all of these things and very visual memories of motorsport and the cars and being around the pit lane at Brands Hatch and stuff. So it all just seemed very kind of, I could put motorsport and photography together. I could do that, could be my life. I'll do that. And it just became a thing, and was always trying to fit motorsport into something. Whenever I was studying kind of history or anything at school, it would be like, oh, but that's the same year that this happened in motorsport. And my teachers would be like, sure. Okay, whatever helps you remember that. And then from that, I went on to study photography at university and slowly worked my way into doing what I do now, which is in Formula E. But I came in via event photography, which was really weird, kind of in hospitality areas like this, taking photos going, oh, but the action's over there, sort of thing, and like sneaking some shots through kind of like crowds and stuff, trying to get some sort of track action, and then got given an opportunity a couple of years ago to do what I do, so I love it.
And what was the recent award you won, which I'm going to embarrass you about?
So I just won the Motorsport UK Young Photographer of the Year, which actually when I was younger it was something when I started to come into motorsport photography, is where you'd kind of go to look at what people were doing, and it was always a thing that in my head I was like, oh, I'd love to do that one day, or get to a point where I feel like I could enter. And I didn't even get to a point where I felt like I could enter this time, but I got bullied into it. And I'm really pleased I did, because I won. So
I know you'll be inspiring others. Hopefully.
I'm the first woman to win it, so hopefully there's more women out there who are thinking that they want to kind of get into motorsport photography.
And on that theme of the first, how has, and appreciating you're in sort of all different areas of motorsport, how's the sort of progression for females, for women, noting this is being filmed and going to be aired during International Women's Day and Week, how's this landscape evolved for sort of each of you within motorsport, do you think? Anybody?
Dramatically for me.
Dramatic. Okay.
Dramatically for me, yeah. I mean, I can remember first time I walked into a Formula One paddock, you could count the number of women in the entire paddock, if not on one hand, then on two. There were so few of us, and as I walked down the back of the garages, you could almost see oh, it was a woman. It was noteworthy that there was a woman walking through the paddock. So there just weren't many of us around. So, and okay, there were a lot less people in the pit lane full stop then. But the majority of women who were there were girls who would sort of, hospitality then was very often a husband and wife, or a couple team. So there would be women doing that. There were a few female press officers. A lady called Annie Bradshaw, who was the press officer for Williams at the time, who was like my pit lane mum. She was always there to go to, because I was working as a press officer. And there was, I can remember one engineer, one of the sort of top engineers for ELF Fuels, was a lady, a formidable French lady called Valerie. I can't remember her surname, but she was probably the most visible woman doing something big in motorsport, but there were just so few, and that for me has been the big change over the years. You would never have seen a female photographer. You saw very few female journalists. There were a few around, but really not very many, and just so few women, full stop.
Yeah, I completely agree. So it's like we were in the paddock more or less at the same time, and when I started with the FIA to be Formula One engineers in the paddock, and the test was a bit daunting, because I was coming, as I said before in the first podcast, I was coming from Italy, where there were women do mechanicking, tracking, so it was kind of normal things, normal activity to be a woman in motorsport. If you like it, you can do whatever you want. And I arrived to this paddock, and I thought, oh, there is not many of us at all. And there was a couple of IT girls, I remember, and another electronic engineer girls, but that's about it. And I remember the first time with an FIA shirt, walking one of the team with my laptop, because I had to download the data from the car, and someone said to me, well, the press room is upstairs. Like, no, I'm not here for that. Wow. So it was kind of like, I think for an engineer, it was even more strange to be there in the paddock. But then I think after you are there and you show that you're worth it, people accept you. And then a couple of years after, I had the opposite things, where I was there downloading data, and people were talking of all sorts of things that I didn't really want to hear about. Right. So it's kind of like, whoa, there is a girl in the room. So I think it's like you go from the first time you're actually there and you are the new kids on the block, and then to get completely accepted into the teams and be part of the gang, so it's not a problem anymore.
One of the boys.
And what about so as a doctor, as a medical professional on trackside? So
it's quite interesting, because we have male and female going to university in medicine, very equal numbers actually.
Sure.
But in motorsport, it's still predominantly male, but saying that, we have absolutely equal opportunities, so I don't think it's quite as hard as maybe in other fields for females to get involved as it is, say, in engineering or journalism, I think, because it's, as long as you can do your job,
sure,
it doesn't matter whether you're male or female. in the medical industry.
Should be the same across everywhere, though, shouldn't it? It's just mad that we're even talking about it.
She's about 14 years younger. Maybe she arrived a bit later.
Society has changed as well. Because back in the times when I first walked into the the Formula One pit lane, if you'd seen a male nurse, people would have really commented on it, because blokes weren't nurses, blokes were doctors.
Sure. Yeah.
And women were nurses. And now nobody would bat an eyelid at a male nurse. So I think out there generally things have changed.
I think that is true as well, because now certainly maybe the older generation still have some acceptance about certain job roles, like female doctors are actually really nurses and males are always the doctors. But I think it's changed over the years now that the perception is equal in the medical field.
So generational thing. So once the dinosaurs go extinct, and then,
I think it's just the way the world's changed as well.
Positively.
I think it's also there is also an history side of things. Like women predominantly had some jobs just before the First and Second World War, and it's only because of the war that women were allowed to have other jobs. And it's like, we don't have to forget, I think the first woman to get into Cambridge University was only like in the 70s. So it's kind of like the evolving of the history and the changing perception that is going through, and obviously has been done a lot in the past 10 to 20 years to change that. But it's not just motorsport, it's society itself that is evolving. So.
And are there still challenges? So for those listening to this, whether they're at school or otherwise thinking about coming into motorsport, whatever the sort of area, are there still challenges that people need to be aware of to sort of,
I think there are challenges in terms of breaking into what is a much sought after area, but I'm not you probably have a better view as the person who's come into it more recently. Have you found any challenges that have come about purely because you're female, or they're just the challenges that any photographer trying to break into this area would have?
It's mainly who you know in motorsport. I think everyone will just agree that it is just who you know, and you can be a really great, talented photographer and just not get a break. And it's tricky, and it's just about having that passion, like we were talking about earlier. You have to have the passion to want, really the drive to really do it, because if you get into any sort of niche market, you just have to keep going. And there are some seasons, especially everything that's being seasonal dependent, and contracts are only really a year, so you kind of get about 6 months of being like, this is great, I've got all these contracts, and then you're like, oh no, I've only got 6 months left of the contract. So
January, February looking very quiet.
And I have with Formula E, it's kind of different for us, because we have kind of the same sort of thing in the beginning of the year, and then by July, when everyone's kind of settled, our season finishes. There's always a moment where everyone's kind of scrambling around, and then you just have to have that faith of going, oh, but by October maybe it'll be fine. And it's just about, I think the biggest thing I've found since being in motorsport is talking to other people. Actually, with the female motorsport community is amazing and so supportive, and it doesn't matter if you're a photographer or you're a journalist or an engineer. Everyone understands the struggles that it can be, and they're just as supportive. I can't stress enough how so many of the women in motorsport have influenced me and given me so much more confidence to kind of keep going and reach out. When I was really little, I was about 18 and I was going to university, and I remember there was one female photographer in Formula One that I knew that existed, and her name is Emily Davenport. I'm not sure if she's around at the moment, but I remember emailing her, and on the day that I had my interview at Farnham University, which is where I went to, she emailed me back basically going, just keep going, I love some of the stuff you're doing, go do university, whatever you want to do, just keep doing it, keep in contact with me. And it was possibly the one of the moments where I was like, yeah, I can do this. Like, everyone's supportive, they're not going to kind of go, oh, go away, like you might come and take a contract from me. Everyone is always really supportive, and that's just such a nice community. So it's worth pushing, but it is very difficult. It's been a long couple of years for me. But
and what about sort of visibility and initiatives? So what exists out there for those looking to come in, whether they're students at the moment or perhaps they're looking to come back into work, having raised a family, for example? What's out there within motorsport, or in specifically your sort of individual sectors within that motorsport? Are there things?
We're looking at each other.
Yeah, I know.
Well, there must be.
So there is an initiative called Girls on Track,
Okay.
which is at school level. So it's an initiative I wish had run when I was at school, to be honest. And it's to get girls exposure to industries within motorsport. So the girls from schools can come to the day, they get a journalism session, engineering, medical session.
Nice.
Sometimes they go karting or do a wheel pit stop challenge and things like that. And it's a whole day of events that they get involved in. And then from that, there's a community, a Girls on Track community as well, that does community events, and they can come and meet people involved in the industry. And certainly I did an event recently for them, and I've had quite a few emails from people that are directed to me, so that then you can invite them to come along with you. And I think that's also a bit about the community, that we want people to be involved, and if someone emails you, you tend to get back to them and say, well, we're doing this and that.
There are other initiatives as well, as like for example there is F1 in schools. It's for boys and girls, and that is like is going since I think 8 years or something like that. So and is like international, is not just national level, and is mainly focused on secondary school and building a car that then they race a little models car, and then obviously there is Formula Student that people can involve when they're in university. There is as well Green Power Challenge for secondary school that is actually like similar to Formula Student, but is an electric battery, and it's amazing.
Well, in fact, Christina and I are involved with the Truro High School for Girls, which is the first school, forget the fact it's a girls' school, it's the first school full stop for their motorsport club to be officially recognised by Motorsport UK, the governing body of the sport.
Wow.
So the girls, so I'm the president of the club and Christine's the vice president of the club, and they have a team in Green Power. But you know what, that's come about as the result of a very passionate teacher. And for me, that's where you can, all the initiatives I think are great and are very important. And for me, from what I've seen, we've all been involved with Dare to Be Different, which is the forerunner to Girls on Track. Dare to Be Different, people might have heard of, was the initiative set up by Susie Wolf to kind of spread the word that this is an arena where there is lots of sort of employment opportunities for girls. So at the various different events we've worked at, I think two things I've noticed is first of all, so for example, you talk about the karting. So many, when I'm doing my media training now, so many of the young kids I'm working with, you say to them, how did you get involved in motorsport? Oh, it was a friend's birthday, we all went karting.
Sure.
Why does nobody take their little girls karting? But no, not every girl's going to love it. Not every boy loves it. But nobody would think. So people would think, no, you take girls somewhere pink and do something fluffy with them. Take them shopping. But
You can do that as well.
Yeah, exactly. But boys like pink and fluffy as well.
Exactly. But also we had one of the events in Manchester a couple of years ago. There was a little girl there, and the teacher said, she likes this because her dad and her brother like motorsport. So I went to talk to this girl, and there was a show car there, a Ferrari show car, and we had some VR goggles, and it was showing them the sort of progress of an oil molecule going through the sort of, through the, I was going to say the car, not the whole car, but sort of through the engine. But this little girl, the teacher said, she knows something about this car apparently. So I started chatting to this little girl, and she starts talking to me about the aerodynamic and the aerodynamic flow. This is called the side pod, and the air, it goes round there and it goes there. This is called the rear wing. And what they've done on this rear wing is they've got this special thing. So she basically starts giving me a sort of rudimentary explanation of a blown diffuser. And I said to the teacher, this little girl doesn't know that because her dad and her brother like motorsport. This little girl knows that because she is clearly interested in aerodynamics. So it's about changing the perceptions of the people out there, the influencers out there, be it the parents or the teachers. Because I think there is still that perception out there that motorsport is a man's world. And yes, there are more men than women working in motorsport, but I don't know whether you guys would agree. It's not a man's world. It's very much motorsport. They're competitive. They want the best people, and quite frankly, they don't care in this day and age whether they're male or female. They just want the best people.
They just want to win.
Yeah. So, but it's about changing the perception of people externally.
How do we do this?
So
presumably there's initiatives and coaching and being role models.
The mentoring and the role models comes into it as well. When my views on this have changed over the years. When I was first working in the sport and people would make something of me being a woman in the mouth, I'd like, well, so what? Big difference. Like, I just wanted to be one of the boys. I wanted to be treated the same as everybody else. Now I can see the value to actually putting it out there that this is a girl doing something, because I've had so many girls over the years have said to me, when I saw you working, when I saw you on the television in the Formula One pit lane, I thought, I could do that, So
lead by example.
Yeah.
I think it's like having a role model or example where a girl can look up and say, no, I can do that because she's done that, so I can do that, is important. Because I don't know, when I grow up, obviously one of my role models was my dad, but it's like there was no woman in the industry that I could look up. It's like the first woman I started to look up was Michelle Mouton, because it's like she did the Dakar and she was doing rally, so she was always in the press. But that was when I already decided that I wanted to be an engineer. So and I think having people in the role that kids can say, she's there, so I can do that. That is quite important.
But
you need to see it to be it.
Yeah.
But that's why you're here. That's why we're doing this, right? Because you are pioneers, in the individual sectors, whether you think that or not. In fact, you are. And so to those listening to this, what advice would you give them to get into motorsport and medical journalism, photography, just being a consultant and also being part of FIA and everything else that you've done with your career? What advice would you give them?
Persistence.
Yeah. Just knock
Persistence
at every door.
Just get
In
going.
one word.
Yeah, boom.
Because I think it is, you mentioned about who you know and things like that, but it isn't like I bombarded people with emails and you
just want to shut you up.
I could believe that. If I've only just met you, and I love you already, but I could give me a job.
Yeah, so because also I don't come from a motorsport family, a background, anything like that. So I thought, and you kind of have to put yourself out there. Yeah. And if someone says, "Oh, can you do this?" and it's not necessarily what you want to do on a grey Sunday, you go and do it. Take those opportunities, because gradually over time people get to know you and it builds up and you can then do what you want to do.
Yeah, for me it's a bit different. I'm always been the quiet one where I don't ask. Well, I'll ask a question.
I'm shocked.
No, I was like, technical question, yes, I would ask, how would that work and things like that. But if someone would say, who wants to do that? I'm like, and I kind of fell into motorsport because someone said to me, you're really good in that. You can come and do scrutiny in our series. And that was Pierluigi Corbari in Euro F3000. And that's the link with the FIA as well. So I would actually encourage people to knock to every door, because probably I would have been able to get there before if I would have done it. But also to be mindful, because I always used to think when I was younger that someone was better than me at that job. And I think, and I used to be always like, wanted to learn 10 times more than someone else, just to show that I could do that with someone else.
But I think that's a common trait, yes. Isn't it? I know across the board, people who sort of look at studies of the way men versus women operate, men tend to oversell themselves. They can do everything, and then they work out afterwards how to do it. Women will tell. Sorry, this is
no, but quite aptly, I didn't press play on the recorder first time round, so
I was going to mention that.
Anyway.
Women will walk in and tell you what they can't do.
Yeah,
rather than
and I think it's believing in themselves, like just thinking, I can do that. I will, as you said, just try it. Even if 100%, just try it. And the worst thing that can happen, you can't do the job and you can ask.
I think you see at the beginning you were saying about what obstacles. I think I certainly, and I know we've had a chat about this before actually, put obstacles in my way mentally, because I think I'm not as good as other people, yourself. And there is that self-belief thing that comes with it, because I certainly wouldn't go and get the opportunities maybe the men may be more confident in getting, and I feel I sometimes have to be 10 times better than the men.
I would never have I was quite happily working over the road, as Eddie Jordan's press officer, when I was approached by when ITV were taking over the contract to cover Formula One. They didn't have a big enough sort of in-house production facility, so it was going to be contracted out. So it went out to tender. So there were various different production companies bidding to make the programmes. I was approached by one of them. Just said, "Do you fancy doing this?" Because they wanted to have a girl on the team. I knew my stuff in terms of the motorsport, knew diddly squat about making television, but so to cut long story short, they offered me the job. Everybody found out I was going to be doing it before it was actually possible for me to do it. So I was presented with this vague concept. I was like, oh, all right then. Suddenly it was a reality. So had it been the other way around, had it been, right, this job is available, do you want to do it? I would have thought, whoa, I've never done that. So I was, and I really remember being given a microphone. They said, there you go, off you go. You are kidding. What do I do? How do I do this? I don't know how to do this. So yeah, that backs up what you're saying. I don't think I would ever have put myself forward. I'd never have had the guts.
Well, even with your award, you were saying you didn't even actually specifically know to enter it. Someone, you said forced, but someone encouraged you to do it.
So I work for an agency called Spacesuit Media, and I mentioned to the head of the agency that I really want to win this award, and he just kept being like, well, you can't win it if you don't enter it. And I just kept saying, I'm not good enough yet. There's no point. I'm not good enough. And I am quite critical of myself, and I'm kind of similar, and it kind of extends to my work through my creativity. So I kind of go, oh, I'm not good enough. This isn't good enough, or whatever. And that does help me to drive myself forward. But I think the best thing I've done is actually be quite open about this insecurity, and I think that's the same for anyone, men or women, because actually you then have conversations like this where you go, I'm not the only person sat here who feels like that about themselves, oh my goodness. And you just have those conversations in the paddock, and you get people who've been there a bit longer who go, I'm just going to push you a little bit more, come and do this podcast, even though I was kind of, you meet these amazing people in the paddocks who will just help you and kind of go, I completely understand that you feel a bit nervous, but come, we'll help you. And it's one of those things that I love about motorsport, is that while it puts me out of my comfort zone and I always want to improve, there are so many people there as a kind of a bit of a safety net who just remind you, even if you forget that they're there. Like, we catch up on Formula E weekends, and you'll be like, how are you? I'll be like, I can't do it today, or I'm really stressed, or I don't like my images, and you just help me so much. And there are so many women out there who do that, and men, and it's about talking about that. And just, it's okay if you're 27 and feel like you can't send that email asking someone that you might know if they have a job, or if you're 16, or if you're 40, it doesn't matter. Just do it and ask people and rely on people.
That's the beauty of motorsport. Like, I remember when I first walked into the F1 paddock, I was like 25, and then I was a new kid on the block with an FIA shirt. And I remember thinking, these people at the FIA, that all of them were over 50, like, these people at the FIA know much more than me. And I remember the guy that was my boss in the electronics department, he said to me, don't worry, when we go for dinner, just bring your notepad, and we're going to have a go through what you think that you don't know about this. And I remember spending lots of evening just going through things that I wasn't really sure about. I have heard about that at university of my master, but I didn't know how to apply them. And I think this safety net of people in motorsport, that is a community, is what to keep going.
It's a team sport. It is a team sport, and that doesn't just apply to what goes on down in the garages. There are all sorts of little teams going on, be it on the technical side, on the media side, on the photographer side. So if you want something at a business that's inclusive, and
it's all
motorsport is brilliant.
Because I've got, I would say, friends I've amassed over the years that if I see you I'll say hello and we'll catch up, and that's really nice as well.
I can tell everybody, just before we've even aired, was together gas bagging, eating cake, having coffee, and it was beautiful to see, because I thought, actually, this is you're not just saying it; it's real. And so I think for those listening to this, whatever age, whatever gender, thinking about coming into it, I think I run a business that sort of serves the profession and the industry, as it were, but I'm not specifically in it, and it's warming. It's really, really good to see.
It's very friendly, very supportive. Motorsport has tough times. Sure. Certain teams will go through tough times at different points, but everyone's there together, even though you might be competing against each other, or in different professions, you're all there because you all want the best for everyone.
Sure, and you're passionate about it. You can see.
Do doctors compete?
That's a great question, but I hope not. I mean, what do you compete?
That's a tough question.
That's a whole
doctors by nature are competitive,
yes.
But also I do think there aren't very many roles within motorsport, and it depends how involved you want to be. And so to some extent, like anything, if you want to get far in your field, you are competing against other people probably for that job.
Any industry,
And
isn't
so
it?
any
You've got to step
industry.
up to the plate, as
Yeah.
you were saying earlier. You've got to be tenacious. You've got to apply for the positions. You've got to ask for advice and mentoring. You've got to ask. You could find somebody as a mentor. Ask them, and you'd be surprised. And then build.
It's quite nice things actually, because motorsport itself is competing, but I'm doing quite a lot with sustainability in motorsport, and I'm trying to change this perception on other people where we don't compete on sustainability. We all want to save the world and make motorsport last for another 50 years, so we need to be all in that. And actually it's quite nice to see that people come around to it, so it's like two teams will talk to each other to see how they can make the championship more sustainable. It's a bit of a different model, and it's nice to see that it's changing with the years, and it's all come from the fact that we are all a community and we are all in this together.
And on that note, and sort of leading on to one of the last questions, so if we were to have this same podcast session again in 20 years' time, so a little bit older, what would you hope's happen? So, you're talking about, one or two teams starting to communicate where they might not have done before, but just generically within motorsport and specifically in your sort of niche areas, what do you hope's happened? What's evolved? What's changed positively for all of us?
So I would hope we wouldn't need it in 20 years' time, in all honesty, because women in motorsport would not be
even a conversation. Yeah.
That would be my thought in 20 years' time, that actually it would be the best person for the job, whether they're male or female.
It would be so nice to get to a point where people don't say, what's it like working in a man's world?
That would be nice.
Did you still get that?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
You are joking.
No, hell no.
My favourite question that anyone ever asks me, and just a random social, I went to a wedding recently, my favourite question is when someone goes, what do you do? Oh, I'm a motorsport photographer. You're a photographer, that's really cool. Sorry, what did you say? Where are you shoot? What do you shoot? Oh, motorsport, like cars and things. So I end up always saying, and their faces always are like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then there's nowhere else for the conversation to go because they don't want to say, is that weird?
Yeah.
How?
Why should that be weird? Women drive cars.
Right.
Women like cars.
It's mad, but that's the perception thing. That's the education thing. That's the.
But I think it's changed. It's now not becoming quite so weird that women like football. Who'd have thought? Or women play rugby.
There's a cricket starting now with the women, and that's going to be a big thing.
I have to say, as we said, it's an age thing, because it's like it could be actually. I think actually the boys that are lurking a bit behind, in the sense that, for example, with the women play football, if you are a boy playing hockey, that's not that normal, because it's more, So in some way, I think it's great to have the session with lots of women, but we need to also make sure that yes, it's inclusive, but it's inclusive. We included everybody. So is football women great? Okay, boys is still not yet there. So there is a reverse side of the story, you see. So, and what I would hope in 20 years' time that we have also some male representative, you as well, other male representative. We actually do a podcast on how great is this community in motorsport, and chat on that.
We can do that now, though, right? So it's just, but yeah, there's still work to be done. Is probably the underlying message there. But as I said earlier, you are quite clearly sort of leading the charge of that, provably. Any more questions? Anything else anyone wants to talk about whilst we've got you on air?
How is about having lots of women in the panel?
I think it's fantastic. As I said, so we were working, and this has been sponsored by Silverstone Park, and Ros Bird, who's the commercial director, and she's a friend, and she was over for supper. We're having dinner the other evening, and I said, look, International Women's Week and Women's Day coming up, we could do something. And so we just sort of get gas bagged like this, really, and it sort of evolved into, let's do 3 videos. It's really, really important, but I think you're also right. I think I would, and we need to also focus on the lads, the boys, schooling, sixth form, post university, even if they don't go to university, what's their career path?
Rose is Silverstone Technology Cluster is already doing that. It's like they got the inspiration for innovation for secondary school, and it's boys and girls, and I got personally with Rose and Hexagon. A project is called Full Steam Ahead, and we're teaching coding to primary schools in rural areas. So we just focus on the fact that they may not have as much access to at other schools that maybe London or whatever. But what we have seen in the coding club, that 50% of the people that come in the club, because it's a voluntary thing, so it's like the kids choose to stay an hour extra school. 50% are girls. That is great. Like,
that's good.
Like coding and engineering.
For me, it's about keeping them there, because you suddenly get to a point where my perception anyway, it didn't happen to me, but it's like the social environment becomes, people start
secondary. That's more secondary school.
But what makes the break? What makes suddenly society say, okay, when you're a youngster, as a kid, it's fine, you can play with toy trucks and stuff, but you should be a young woman now, and it's that not happening, I think, is what we need.
But I think then I think also getting at primary school age, then hopefully they have enough interest, because I do think that happens at sort of teenage years, particularly when you're sort of focusing. But also if you're not really interested in something by the time you're a teenager, you're then a bit too cool for school. Yeah. So you're not going to suddenly take an interest.
Look at that's why I always ask the question about Genesis, because the passion for this from each of you, your stories, started from an earlier age, right? And then it was nurtured, it was identified by somebody within the niche or the sector, and then here we are. So I would agree. I think schooling is, and parents perhaps, and their environment is clearly going to sort of lead the way. But that's it. I think we'll close. So ladies, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We will be back on here in 20 years' time doing a repeat. Hopefully BRDC will put some heating on, because it's bloody cold. But this is an Inside Silverstone podcast presented by Longhurst and run in partnership with Silverstone Park. Again, thank you Silverstone Park for sponsoring it. Thank you very much. The Inside Silverstone podcast is produced by the team at Longhurst for the benefit of those with a passion for all things tech, engineering and innovation. For more information, please visit longhurst.co.uk/Inside Silverstone, whilst also remembering to give us a 5 out of 5 star rating on iTunes. Please note that neither Chris Broome or Longhurst work for Silverstone Park, Silverstone Circuit or Silverstone Technology Cluster.